All right, so today we're going to dive into something pretty fundamental to any relationship, and that's deception. You sent over some really interesting stuff from Pasted Text. It's from the Inner Balance Red Print podcast, and I thought it'd be a good deep dive to look at kind of the impact of lies in relationships, and maybe some clues on how to spot them, and really the power of truth and love in rebuilding trust or maintaining it.
Yeah, it is interesting when we think about deception, we often think about outright lies, but, it's a lot broader than that.
Yeah.
It could be withholding information, manipulating the facts to paint a different picture,
Hmm.
even presenting a version of yourself that's not entirely authentic. It's about creating a misleading impression, and that can happen in so many subtle ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you consider kind of all the different shades of dishonesty, it makes you wonder, why do we even do it?
Yeah.
And the source material brought up some really interesting reasons. I bet some of these will resonate with you. Fear of conflict is a big one. Just that feeling of wanting to avoid an argument by, kind of softening the truth a little bit.
And it's interesting about that fear of conflict,
Yeah.
especially for you and your relationships, how it can sometimes come from a desire to maintain harmony in the short term. But if we connect that to the bigger picture, often that avoidance actually just postpones the inevitable difficult conversation.
Right.
And it builds this underlying current of dishonesty that can actually erode the very harmony that you're hoping to protect.
Right. Yeah. And then there's the desire for control. That's a tough one, isn't it? Where someone might bend the truth to kind of steer things in a certain direction or to hold on to power in the relationship.
And if you think about that need to control through deception, it really speaks to a potential insecurity within the relationship itself. That it kind of raises the question, what does it say about the foundation of a connection when one person feels the need to manipulate the narrative rather than trusting in mutual understanding and respect?
Yeah, and insecurity plays such a huge role, I think, too. That feeling of not being good enough can lead someone to maybe exaggerate their successes or hide parts of themselves that they think are flaws. It's almost a protective mechanism, but it often backfires.
Precisely. And, while those little embellishments or omissions might be intended to make you seem more appealing or avoid judgment, they actually create a barrier to true intimacy.
Hmm.
How can someone genuinely connect with the real you if they're only seeing a curated version?
Yeah, that's such a good point. And then this one's interesting because it feels kind of counterintuitive, the idea of protecting others as a reason for lying. You might think you're sparing someone's feelings by not telling them the whole truth.
But here's the paradox. Even with the best intentions, that withholding of truth can still be incredibly damaging to trust when the full story eventually emerges, as it often does. The person that you were trying to protect might actually feel more hurt not only by the original situation, but also by the feeling that you didn't trust them enough to handle the truth.
It really all comes back to this central point, doesn't it? No matter the initial reason, deception in all its forms slowly but surely chips away at the bedrock of any relationship, and that's trust. And on that note, Pasted Text shared this really insightful quote. A lie may take care of the present, but it has no future. And that was Croft M. Pence. And it really makes you think about the long-term impact.
And that quote is so relevant. It highlights the inherently short-sighted nature of deception in relationships. While a lie might offer a temporary fix or a way to navigate a tricky moment, it doesn't build anything of lasting value. In fact, it actively undermines the potentials of a truly authentic and stable future together.
So we've looked at kind of what deception is and some of the common reasons behind it. Let's talk about what it actually does to a relationship, what it does to your relationships. And our source materials is pretty clear on this, and it's not a pretty picture. First and foremost is that erosion of trust.
Yeah, and trust is the foundation. Once that's cracked by deception, it's incredibly difficult to mend it.
Hmm.
It can lead to a situation where every interaction feels uncertain, and that sense of safety and security within the relationship can really evaporate.
And it also creates this emotional distance, doesn't it? When you're not being fully honest with someone, you're essentially putting up a wall. You can't have that deep, genuine connection if you're not sharing your true self, your real thoughts and feelings.
And that distance might manifest in, feeling less able to be vulnerable, less willing to share your inner world. And over time, this can lead to a profound sense of loneliness within the relationship, even when you're physically present with the other person.
Yeah. And then there's the paranoia and doubt that can creep in, as the source points out. Just one instance of deception can make you question everything else. You might start, replaying past conversations in your mind, wondering what else might not have been entirely truthful.
And what's particularly interesting is how this can impact your own sense of reality. You might start to doubt your own judgment, your intuition constantly second-guessing your partner and even yourself. That constant state of uncertainty can be incredibly draining emotionally, and that gut feeling when something feels off is often your intuition picking up on subtle inconsistencies. It's important to acknowledge that feeling and explore it rather than dismissing it outright.
Now let's turn to the more positive side. Our source emphasizes the powerful role of truth and love in relationships, in your relationships. It talks about how honest conversations actually strengthen the bonds you share. It makes sense, doesn't it, when you can be truly open and vulnerable with someone.
That transparency can foster a much deeper level of understanding and connection. It shows that you trust the other person enough to share your authentic self, imperfections, and when that vulnerability is met with empathy and acceptance, it really solidifies the emotional intimacy between you.
And love, the source says, truly thrives in truth. It's almost like they're two sides of the same coin. A love that's built on a foundation of lies can never be truly authentic or secure.
Exactly. Real love embraces the truth, even when it's challenging. It's about accepting your partner for who they truly are, not who they might be pretending to be. And when honesty is a core value, it creates a safe space for both of you to grow and be yourselves.
And the source also offers a message of hope, suggesting that truth can indeed heal, even after there's been deception. But it also rightly points out that this requires a real commitment from both individuals involved.
Healing after deception is likely to be a complex journey, and it's important to understand that it's not always guaranteed. It takes immense effort, patience, and a genuine desire from both sides to rebuild what has been damaged. The person who was dishonest needs to take full responsibility and consistently demonstrate trustworthiness moving forward, while you, as the injured party, need to be willing to navigate the pain and work towards forgiveness if that's the path you choose.
So how might you actually spot deception in a relationship? So the source gives us some clues. One key thing to watch out for is inconsistencies in stories. You might notice details shifting or changing over time.
And what's interesting here is how difficult it can be for someone to maintain a lie consistently. The more details involved, the higher the chance of contradictions or slips. It might not be about catching someone in a huge fabrication, but more about noticing those subtle things that just don't quite add up.
Another red flag the source mentions is evasive behavior. Someone might avoid answering direct questions or try to quickly change the subject when something sensitive comes up.
This avoidance could signal discomfort with the truth. They might be consciously or unconsciously trying to steer the conversation away from areas where their deception might be revealed. It's worth noting the difference between this and someone who might simply be more introverted or needs time to process. But a consistent pattern of evasion around certain topics is definitely something to pay attention to.
And then there are those body language cues. The source lists things like shifty eyes, becoming overly defensive, or fidgeting.
While body language can offer hints, it's really important not to jump to conclusions based solely on these cues. Nervousness can manifest in many different ways, and someone might exhibit these behaviors for reasons completely unrelated to dishonesty. However, when these cues occur alongside other red flags, they can contribute to that overall sense that something isn't quite right.
Finally, the source emphasizes the importance of trusting your own gut feeling, that intuition that something is off, but it also wisely advises against jumping to conclusions without seeking more clarity.
That instinctual feeling you might have is often based on those subtle inconsistencies in nonverbal cues that your conscious mind might not fully be processing. It's valuable information, but it shouldn't be the only basis for accusations. Instead, it should prompt you to have open and honest conversations to understand what might be causing that feeling of unease.
If a relationship has been affected by deception and both you and your partner are committed to healing, the source outlines some vital steps in rebuilding trust. The very first is acknowledgement. The person who is dishonest needs to take complete responsibility for their actions.
This acknowledgement needs to be genuine and heartfelt. It involves truly understanding the impact of the deception and expressing sincere remorse without making excuses or downplaying the harm that was caused. This is the absolutely crucial first step in even beginning to rebuild trust.
Following that crucial acknowledgement is open communication. Both partners need to be willing to talk openly and honestly about what happened, how it has affected them, and their feelings as they move forward.
This requires creating a safe and non-judgmental space for these difficult conversations. You need to feel heard and validated in your pain, while the person who is dishonest needs to be willing to answer those tough questions with complete honesty and transparency.
The source rightly points out that trust isn't something that can be rebuilt with words alone. Consistent actions are absolutely essential. The person who lied needs to demonstrate through their behavior over time that they are now someone you can rely on and believe.
That consistency is key. It's about demonstrating a pattern of honesty and reliability in all those everyday interactions. Small acts of integrity build up over time and gradually help to rebuild that lost confidence and trust. It's really a marathon, not a sprint.
And finally, there's forgiveness. The source explains that forgiveness needs to be earned and shouldn't be rushed. It also involves letting go of resentment, which is a significant step for the person who is on the receiving end of the deception.
Forgiveness is a personal journey and a choice. It doesn't mean condoning the deception or forgetting that it happened, but rather releasing the burden of anger and resentment. It's important for the person who was dishonest to understand that forgiveness is a gift, not something they are automatically entitled to, and it takes time and consistent effort to earn it.
The source also makes a really important point, and it's a tough one. Not all relationships can survive deception, and sometimes, as difficult as it is, love means letting go. It's a harsh reality, but it's vital to recognize that sometimes the damage is too deep or the pattern of dishonesty is too ingrained to overcome.
Ultimately, the decision of whether to stay and try to rebuild or to move on is a deeply personal one. It's crucial to prioritize your own well-being and to recognize when a relationship is no longer serving your best interest, especially if there's a recurring pattern of dishonesty.
So to bring it all together, the core message from this deep dive is clear truth and love are deeply intertwined. Deception might seem like a quick fix in the short term, but honesty is the only sustainable foundation for a truly meaningful and lasting relationship if you're navigating trust issues. Remember that genuine love values honesty above everything else.
And if we connect this back to your own life, fostering honesty in your relationships not only strengthens those bonds, but also contributes to your own sense of integrity and inner peace. Living truthfully creates a sense of alignment that is ultimately far more fulfilling than any temporary advantage gained through deception.
As you reflect on this deep dive into the complexities of deception, I want you to consider the subtle ways trust is built and broken in your own relationships, beyond just those obvious lies. What small acts of honesty or perhaps even dishonesty have had a significant impact on your connections. For better or for worse, it's definitely something to think about.